one of the things that I learned somewhere along the way is I've decided my kids are going to have careers that don't even exist today. So I have like no expectation or pressure for them to like be a doctor or a lawyer or, something like that, financial advisor. Like they're going to be in a career that doesn't exist today. And my job isn't to dictate that to them. My job is just to provide an environment that helps them learn and grow and be comfortable making mistakes.
Hey, it's Samantha Hartley of the Profitable Joyful Consulting Podcast. This season, we are talking about empowering women. And I am joined in the mission of empowering women by my guest today, who is going to talk with us about how she does that in her business and share her ideas with us. In today's episode, we're talking about unapologetic cash flow. And what does that really mean? Well, I love unapologetic, I love cash, and I love flow. So how do those ideas come together? In this episode, Jen Sapel is going to explain to us exactly how we can achieve that in our businesses. I want to just ask you, have you ever been in a situation where your team members got paid, your contractors, or possibly even employees got paid in the business, but at the end of the month, there was nothing left for you? It was hard to make payroll for you, or there wasn't enough for an owner's draw, or for you to receive the money out of the business, even though you're bringing in all of that revenue. Well, if you've ever been in that situation where your expenses were such that you came last, then this is definitely for you. Now, hopefully you're not in that situation, but you're still excited to hear about how you can create more cash flow in your business, then definitely you're going to enjoy this conversation. And I always enjoy conversations with Jen. I love the way she breaks down these financial concepts and talks to me about the ways that we share our values for creating good in the world. So I specifically want you to hear the actions that she talks about that we can take. I love her third idea for what to do with our money. And I love that she shares with me spiritual ideas and a spiritual outlook about the way that we are stewarding money and resources in our business in order to make the world a better place. And the concept of enough, like, is there enough? How much is enough money? Do you really need to have all the money in the entire world? And specifically how she personally in her journey overcame money shame, and what we can do to help future generations to disentangle money from the shamefulness that has sometimes accompanied it. Jen Sapel is a recovering type A who grew up in a home that was financially unstable post-divorce. She founded UTOR Wealth, that's Latin for enjoy, to show high-earning women how to enjoy and be confident in all their financial decisions. Please enjoy this conversation with Jen Sapel. Jen Sapel, back in to tell us some amazing tales of financial crisis and opportunity. So share with us a little bit today on the topic of unapologetic cash.
Unapologetic cash flow.
Cash flow. Yes,
I have so, you're going to have to keep me on track on this one. I have so much to say about this one. But can we start with a story?
Please do.
Okay. So one of my favorite stories and favorite clients, always made a decent amount of income, but she got caught in credit card traps. So she was like constantly carrying thousands of dollars of balances on several credit cards.
Spender whose comfort zone is debt.
Yes.
Negative number.
Yes.
I know this person.
And just like that was normal, right? That like, that was just normal quality of life.
Yeah.
So once we worked with her on just changing her framework around money and then setting up systems around her money, her life like upside down in a very short period of time. So within a year, she went from being in debt to being like having a lot of her debt paid off, almost all of it, not all of it, but almost all of it, and having some money set aside in savings. And even better than that, so even better than just the numbers, because she became more comfortable and confident with her monthly cash flow, she made completely different financial decisions. One of them being pivoting to a completely different career where she had to take a pay cut initially, but the longer term projection for her was better in a completely different area of expertise. And she's like surpassed any expectation she had for herself, just a couple years ago. Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So that's the best case scenario. That's the like when you really own your cash flow and you're comfortable with your cash flow, you really do improve your quality of life. It gives you the opportunity to improve your quality of life.
Totally. So I'll tell you from my perspective, because one of my clients is a CFO. And so I hear the inside of her clients' business stories.
Mm-hmm.
I know this from my business and from those of my clients as well. It can be easier if it's just like you managing the cash flow in your own consulting business, even though like not super easy for a lot of people. That's
Mm-hmm.
one thing.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have like somebody else working with you in the business and maybe team members and employees and things like that. So one of the things that tends to happen with our kinds of businesses is that everybody gets paid, but not you.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't enough money to cover all the things that need to be covered.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, I often refer to it as the revenue roller coaster. In terms of like the way payments come in. So why do we end up that way as business owners? And what are some of the things that we can do about it?
I have a suspicion, and maybe you can confirm this with me more than I can do on my own. I have a suspicion that is more prevalent a problem with women than it is for men.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because putting other people's salaries, putting any other business expense above our own caregiving, above taking care of ourselves, is a uniquely feminine problem.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I'm sure that male business owners do too. But just listening to you say it was like all of my male business owner friends are like, of course I pay myself. Like, why would I be in business if I didn't pay myself?
Yeah. What I've seen, what I know from my CFO client about her clients is that there will be, there won't be enough left. Like that's a different situation. I mean, yes, it's the same situation. So in those kinds of companies, there's a lot of employees, there's a lot of expenses. And by the time everyone is paid, there just isn't enough left for like an owner's draw, but so the operating expenses of the company are too much. The situation that we're talking about that you're referring to. So I had a group of consultants I worked with. They're a trio of partners, and they had an employee and happened to be a male employee, which is by the by, because I've seen this anytime. This is why I so discourage consultants from hiring someone full time until the absolute required time to do so, because 100% of the time that payroll will be made for that person before it will be for them. So during the time I was working with the three partners, I saw that over and over again, that money wasn't terrible in the business, but that person's making that person's salary was more of a strain. And when I asked like when they had paid themselves last, or when they had paid themselves an owner's draw above and beyond just like that basic salary that they paid, that kind of thing wasn't happening. So you're exactly right that there's like the issue with cash flow is there isn't enough to cover everything that I need to cover. But like at the end of the pay period, at the end of the month, there's no money left for me. Is basically
Yeah. And the best business owners that I've worked with, know, so there's kind of two different mentalities. Finance can be super complicated, but usually the underlying principle of it is really simple. And so in both of those cases that you just described, like you increase revenue, you decrease expenses. The best and most savviest and sustainable business owners increase revenue.
Yeah.
You cannot expense cut your way into growing a business.
Totally. However, I have to say this as well as an example of somebody who loves to increase revenue. You also cannot keep putting water into an empty bucket or a bucket with a hole in it, because I'm just a sales oriented person. And my answer is always like, well, let's go sell more stuff. And if there is a messed up system within the organization, then that isn't going to repair the problem. So I love that. We just came at that from probably the opposite angles that someone would expect based on our roles.
It's true. Absolutely true. 100%. But it's part of why you and I get along so well.
Exactly. And we know the limitations of that other person's role.
Yeah.
So when I will often look at an organization and be like, what all are you paying for?
Mm-hmm.
And my issue with a lot of women business owners is they don't always know the answer to that question.
Right.
So that there will be things that surprise them. And so there will be holes in that bucket that are leaking, whether it's that salary for somebody who should be a contractor or who isn't pulling their weight inevitably.
Yeah.
This always do. Like they've hired somebody and that person isn't pulling their weight, or there's just too many expenses.
Yeah. So what we're both talking about is intentionality.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things missing in like the employee description that you shared, if the employee is constantly getting paid, but there's not enough for the owner draw, in any business expense, you should be able to point to, this is an investment in the business. So an investment means by making this choice, I am increasing the capacity or the efficiency of the business. You should be able to point to that in any business expense. So if you having that full-time employee means that like there's no owner's draw, then we're either paying that employee too much or we're not getting enough value out of that position. So either the employee has to go, right? Or we need to have a conversation with the employee that's like, hey, for this position to make sense for you, like this is the target we need to be hitting.
Absolutely. So I was just talking this week with a client who has an employee who's a $4,000 a month approximately employee.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what accounts is she taking care of? These two, that's $8,000 in revenue. And I said, that's great. And that's only a 2X on that investment. And does that person have the capacity to take another one? Because if it was a 3X investment, then that starts to look like a good return on that expense.
Yep.
So is that how you would put that together?
I don't do a lot of consulting inside a business and like employment contracts, but like in my personal experience in business, absolutely. And I'm with you in that I not only, and it's taken me a while, because I think we're all kind of conditioned in certain ways of thinking about business, but I've started to come around to contracting positions usually are better fit for both parties. That like, I don't want to be 100% invested in one. There are plenty of people who like they thrive in that type of position. I would say there's just as many who say, I like to have my foot in the door in 2 or 3 different things. I don't want to be, full-time in any one business.
Yeah. And that's kind of the new evolution of the way things have happened. I mean, it was that way for me and a lot of my clients before COVID. And like since COVID, I think we're finding that that's much more common.
Yeah.
And legally, I know in California, here's the deal is if somebody's wearing your shirt and it's got the brand on it and they're out visiting customers and they're driving a truck that has your logo on it, like that person's an employee of your company. That's going to be a different situation than if you have somebody who has is a freelancer who has a couple of other clients and they have a branded email with you. That's usually where the difference is. And it's project work where the work is always different rather than they're kind of like sitting at a desk in your company. Now that legal stuff aside, bring in the best person for the job. And I've said before, I have, between 9 and 12 people who work on my team. And the only people who are full-time employees in the company are my husband and me.
Oh, wow. Awesome. I love that setup. And I'm sure that your 9 to 12 employees do too.
I think they do. I mean, I love it because they bring all of these different perspectives. Like, what are you doing for your other clients? Well, tell me about that. Well, my other client had that problem too. And here's how we solved it. And I feel like, great.
Right.
Great. No, and I'm never threatened like, oh my God, they're seeing other businesses. Might they quit?
Right.
If it's no longer a fit, they'll quit.
Right. Right.
So
beautiful.
So you're calling it unapologetic cash flow. Why unapologetic?
Yeah, I'm thinking more, I think unapologetic cash flow was a sexier way of saying budget.
Oh, it is much sexier.
Personal.
Oh, are we talking about budget? I came into the wrong conversation because I hate everything about budget. So
that's why I call it unapologetic cash flow instead of budget. You're not the only. The word budget lives in our brain the same place the word diet lives in our brain. Like nobody wants to do it.
Exactly the same place. However, there are some reasons to have a budget. Probably. So what do we need to know about that?
Yeah. Again, I'm perfectly fine if nobody ever uses the word budget again. I'm perfectly fine if nobody uses the word diet again. But, and managing our cash flow. So like being really intimate about what money is coming into our household on a monthly basis, what money is going out of our household on a monthly basis. The more confident and the more unapologetic we are about that, the more powerful lives we can live just in general. And I think a lot of the mistakes people make there, like one of the first things I like to do with clients is say, let's take a look at your financial decisions, like your day-to-day financial decisions. And let's say how many of these decisions are really paying for your past self. So like if we looked at your last month's expenses, anything you're putting on a credit card is you're paying for your past self. And now let's look and say, how much of these expenses are you enjoying today? So like, where's the enjoyment out of what's going out of your cash flow today? And then what are you putting towards your future self? And if you do that in terms of percentages, that usually can be a really illuminating kind of exercise to be like, wow, like 25% of my monthly income is going to my past self. Only this much is going to my today self, or 100% is going to my today self, right? And then what's the percentage taking care of my future personhood?
Right. So, for example, I'll have we pay for cards every month. So I'll have my payments that I make in this month for last month's whatever we sent through credit cards so that we get points and all those wonderful things. And then this month, whatever bills are, paid in the moment, and then all of our investments and insurance payments and all of that kind of stuff, it would be the future self things. So the equivalent for this in a business is going to look pretty much the same way, where I will have, here's the invoices for my team that I pay at the end of the month. And then here are the constantly coming into the business are here's my website hosting and my email service and all of those kinds of things. And then I don't know about future things. I guess maybe some of our investments in advertising or something like that would be the future.
Yeah. Or even sometimes an employee, right? And so back to your example, where if you hire somebody because you need to increase capacity, it's absolutely reasonable to be like, I'm not going to be able to take an owner draw while we ramp up, right, this new position, but I'm making this investment now, not taking an owner draw for this specific period of time, because my expectation is we can bring on however many new clients, new engagements, new cases, and my owner draw is going to increase by some expectation at a future point.
Good. Okay. So that's super smart. So here's where I run into issues with budgeting being self-employed. When most consultants traditionally have extreme revenue roller coaster situations. So it's like a $12,000 month, a $25,000 month, a $6,000 month, a $40,000 month, a $700 month. Like that's the dire example of it, but it's not inaccurate. So what I teach my clients to do is to get to like a steady something, so that it can be like, I always know, no matter how high it is, it'll always be a minimum of 20,000, or it'll be a minimum of 25, or we get 40, or whatever, however we get that, so that there is a regular amount each month. But that amount does vary. And I think that it's hard for people who aren't working the way that I'm teaching my clients to work. I think it can be hard for them to say, like, they don't know how much money is going to come in 3 months down the line. So what's a responsible way to create unapologetic cash flow?
Yeah.
Having literally no idea what's going to be happening 3 months from now.
A couple things come to mind. The first is, you are correct, and I've seen the same and I've experienced the same. What usually is pretty consistent, though, is what if we looked at it in years in terms of months?
Okay.
So it's usually pretty consistent where I will find clients, just like you described, where month to month cash flow varies wildly. But if we look back at the last 3 to 5 years, they're very consistently at a number, right? And that's usually like where they come to you because we need to get past that number at some point. But but we usually operate, it's like financial homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
We usually operate where like, the comfort level is 250, 500,000. Yeah, exactly.
500. Yep. 750. Yep.
So if we look at it from an annual perspective, if you're like, okay, so annually I generally make, let's just say $300,000 a year. Wonderful. Month to month, it absolutely is going to vary widely. But one, look at it annually. Two, I love what you just said. Like, let's set a set amount. I really love percentages. So I'm like, if you get if you make rules, I like rules and systems.
Good.
So if we have your business cash flow and we have your personal, household cash flow, those are two separate things. Money comes into the business. There's a percent that goes into the operating account. There's a percent that goes into the tax account. We're going to have to pay taxes at some point. And then there's a percent or the bulk. Once we've got operating expenses, your percentage funded for operating expenses and your percentage for taxes set aside. Now we cross the money over, and either the rest of it goes to your personal cash flow, right? Or a percentage of it or whatnot.
Okay.
I also I like putting as much, a lot of business owners make the mistake where they keep everything in the business, right? Like your heart, your soul, your blood, your sweat, your tears, and every penny.
Yeah.
I'm often reminding business owners that cannot be your only asset, right? Especially if it's 100% of your time and energy and heartache, it cannot also be 100% of your money. So let's move some of what you're generating over here. You're generating wealth over here. Let's move some of that over to your personal balance sheet, right? And start to make some other investments and diversify some of your cash beyond the business. I'll pause there because you have a thought.
Good. No, I love that idea. Like pull that money out of the business and do something else with it. So, okay. So, and I definitely want to come into like, what are those additional things that we could put that money into? So for operating expenses, if we have this revenue roller coaster, and instead of just the answer of like, well, as little as possible, how much money would you attribute to if someone has, let's say, $20,000 is their minimum that's coming in, which I think for a lot of our listeners would be very nice. And for some of our listeners, it's like, what? I can live on that. So if 20,000 is the number that's coming in, what is the percentage that you would like for taxes, operating expenses that stay in the business, salary, and then like owner's draw or the rest of that coming out?
Yeah. So great question. And I think that the answer to that question is going to 100% vary person to person. The way that I structure my life, and I am self-employed, and I can have really large fluctuations. There's a percentage of my business that's pretty consistent. And then there's parts of my business that can vary like by six figures on a month-to-month basis. So I do both. In my life, the way that I structure that is I know what my business expenses are. So every time that check comes in, I'm only putting like business expense for the month. I only want like 2-3 months of operating expenses in there. I'm not hanging on to business expense cash inside of my business. So I cover that, like that nut 1-2 months. If it's a big influx, maybe I'll put 3, but probably no more than that. Taxes, that's a personal, like what is your tax liability? It depends on what tax bracket you're in. Many of us, if we're self-employed, if you're earning then the $400,000, $500,000 a year range, you probably have a tax liability of somewhere between 25 and 30%. So that's me. Like it's just 30%. Anytime any money comes in, all of my money that comes in, 30% goes into the tax bank because I know that like that bill is due. So that is that percentage for me. It could be different for your listeners. And then for me, I am putting retirement contributions stay on the business side of things. 100%. I keep almost no money on my business balance sheet. 100% goes on my personal balance sheet. I want to do way more different and diversified things here.
Got it. Okay. And so then I want to talk about estimated taxes because some people have to pay those as well. So those would come out of that tax fund on a whatever the quarterly basis that is. And then I'm just thinking if there's any other expenses that fall into that. But
have you read the book Profit First?
Yes.
Okay. So he's got like his system. I think there's 10 accounts. I like the book. I like the system. I think here's the thing about, here's one of the things that trips people up about finances. Is we have a notion that because money is quantifiable, that there's a right way and there's a wrong way just because we can count. And finance is much more creative than it is science. It's much more art than it is science. So like the Profit First guy and the 10 buckets, if that system works for you, do it 100%. My bucket, I have like 3 buckets. I don't want 10 buckets.
Way too many buckets.
Agreed.
One big bucket that's me, and then another very small bucket that's the other stuff.
Same. I have like 3 buckets on either side. I'm like, it's my tax account, it's my operating account, and this is my general like checking account. Same on my personal side. I'm like, this is my savings account, this is my investment account, this is my retirement account, and then there's real estate properties and things like that. But
Good.
I don't need 10 buckets, but I
Yeah.
do need a methodology. 100% of the money comes in, and every single time that money comes in, 30% goes to taxes, 1 to 2 months operating expenses. Sometimes that could be a percentage goes in this bucket. Everything else goes onto my personal balance sheet.
Perfect. Good. Super clear. So I find that I run into challenges and I hear clients run into challenges where it's like, well, I only have, especially like investing in my services sometimes. So it's like, well, I have $10,000 a month coming in right now. And you're telling me that to work with you is going to be 5,000. It varies. But let's say, for example, 5,000 a month, but I only have 10,000 coming in. Well, that seems like a crazy thing to do. And then in 5 months, they're earning $30,000 a month. And it seems like a less crazy thing to do, for example. So to me, investing in marketing is just kind of like your contractor example. Like sometimes there's a time I won't take an owner's draw because I'm investing in a contractor. When those are the kind of crazy risks that we have to take as business owners of like, I don't know how this is going to work out, but this is a big gamble that I'm going to take. When is it, how do we discern what is like, well, that was a crazy thing to do versus like, yes, this is a calculated risk I'm taking from a budgeting / unapologetic cash flow point of view?
I'm trying to think about like actual examples. Like
Yeah.
what initially comes to mind to me is you absolutely have to be able to articulate your expectation for writing that check.
Yeah.
A lot of times people, especially business owners, because business owners tend to be risk takers and they tend to be intuitive.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
so like, we're going to do it because it seems like it's a good idea.
I feel good about this.
Yeah. But as a financial professional, I would just be like, if you can't tell me explicitly, hiring Samantha, my expectation in making this investment and engaging with Samantha is that it will increase my revenue by this much and this amount of time frame. If you can't be very explicit about the return and the time frame, I would say you're not ready for it. And you have to be willing to take the risk. So like if you write the check and worst case scenario happens, are you willing to do that? And if both of those things you can do, then do those things.
Yeah. I mean, I think and I have had examples of like, that's literal example of like client who was earning around 10 a month and invested 5 a month. And then within X amount of time had added an additional 600 in that first year with me. A lot of clients have added, at least double is the expectation. So if you're earning 150 and you, or 120 and you invest 60 and you earn the next year 300, like this is a pretty good return.
Yeah.
And that's a big promise. And like I said, there's other ways to work with me. So it isn't always this huge gulp, but a lot of times it is a leap of faith. I would say also I have invested in mentoring that didn't return incidentally, but what I've always done is learned enough from that I feel like, well, what am I going to do to make that up to myself? So I'll go sell something to be like, that was a $40,000 lesson. Now I'm smarter and I won't do that again. I've also had, let's say, other investments, like a shorter term investment that in every case, to me, it's a little bit like gambling. Like if I couldn't afford to lose that money, then I think that at the end of the day, that's another one of like, I know it's very common in like the kind of classic internet marketing and online coaching world of like, well, just put it on a credit card or like, give me a backup credit card. And I'm like, I feel like I don't work with people who are in that kind of financial straits of if this is your last money. But in general, in business, we do have to take big risks. But if you're ever taking a risk that you're like, well, if this $20,000 investment doesn't work out, then I'll be broke and under a bridge, then then don't do it.
Yeah. And that was number 2. Like if this risk doesn't pay off, if worst case scenario happens, can you accept that? Is that acceptable? So is that an acceptable risk for you? And different people will answer differently there. But I've had friends who have done the credit card thing, put the big coaching thing on the credit card and it absolutely paid off. And I've had friends where it was an absolute bust. I did, to your example about the big coaching engagement. I do also know somebody who she called it a bust. Like this was a bad thing, but the one thing they got out of that program was it's your business. You can raise rates anytime. And so just hearing that, which wasn't like a part of the program at all, it was like an ancillary answer to a side conversation or question. Like just hearing that giving her permission and validating her for just like, it's my business. I can change it whenever I want and raise my prices whenever I want to. I don't need permission from anybody else. That was worth it for her, just because that's where she ended up hearing that advice. So sometimes the payoff isn't always, to your point, like a 1-for-1, we can like point back to it from cash flow.
I would say so many times what you get out, you're always going to get out of it I would say, first of all, what you put into it, but you're always going to get out of it what you're supposed to get out of it. And that's going to be a very frustrating thing. So sometimes what people need to know is you shouldn't be self-employed. And that is a sucky way to learn that lesson.
Yeah.
Very, very not nice. But I think you can, to me, there's two ways to lose in this. One is like you're mad because you were wrong. Like, I don't like to have something not work out. And then you can lose money. And usually one or the other of those is going to be more painful for you.
Yeah.
And so the opportunity, and I think I completely agree with you. Like I've gone to things before where I've been like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm paying for this. And then I meet the person and I'm like, oh, you're why I'm here. So I think always looking for, and to me, this is my financial philosophy in general, is like, you're going to get out of this what you're supposed to get out of it. So like, why don't you trust and take it easy?
That's the intuitive part.
Totally. Now the budgeting piece is I don't like to be told what I can't do, including by myself in my own business. So how do we help besides sell more? How do we help people like me who are like, don't like to have limits, manage their desire for whatever they want, however much they want?
What's funny is what I would do in that case is like, if you had it all, like if I dropped $1 million into your business tomorrow, what would it look like? And what a lot of times we find is when we don't have any limitations, where it's like we get a little bit bored. Like, oh, well, I'm like, constraint is what like really makes us be unique and creative and problem solving and that kind of thing. But like the budgeting and dieting conversation, I would also ask, nothing about what do you want to restrict. I would just ask, what do you want more of? So as a business owner, in terms of income, what do you want more of? And as a financial advisor, I would say, what and how does that translate into your quality of life and lifestyle? Like, what are you going to use that money for? But also, what do you want more of? How do you want to be spending more of your time? How do you, what more clients? What if your perfect day or perfect week could look like this? And then like, what do we need to invest in to make that happen? That would be more of like the budgeting lens. Like, these are the steps that we need to go from having what I have now to having more of what my energy, my time, my uniqueness is being spent on a day-to-day basis. I don't know if that answered your question.
It totally answered my question. I love that. And what's funny is I really do think that the budgeting and dieting analogy holds up in this way, because it's like, well, what's your favorite food? And let's say it's pizza. It isn't. But what if it were pizza? Well, do you want to have pizza all day, every day? No, of course you don't. Do you have all the pizza you could possibly have? No, because at the end of the day, you eventually realize, actually, I probably should have a salad as well. And I think one of a lot of our issues with the billionaire races and this going to space nonsense, or like taking a submarine until you get killed or whatever. Like part of the problem I think a lot of us have with that is like, really, who needs that? And it's not like it's not like I want to deny anybody the opportunity to do that. But after a certain point, it's really just about a competitive masculinity contest, as opposed to like, really, like, how do you want, as you're asking, like, what's the ideal day and what's the ideal week and what really looks good and fun for you? So you're exactly right. Like, maybe $1 million is the right amount. And I will often say, like, what I love is that it can measure your contribution. And so for a lot of my clients, they're like, as I've said many times, like, they'll come to me and they'll be like, it's a $3 million a year business. I'm like, rock and roll, let's build it. Or they're like, I want to build it to 10 myself, and we're doing that. And then I'm going to cash out and then go to my island, and somebody else is going to take this to wherever it needs to be when I sell it to so-and-so big company. Yeah. Perfect. But I love, it's a thing that motivates and excites them.
Yeah. And I love like your point about pizza, when it comes to food in particular, like, enough is very satisfying.
Yeah.
Too much is not, right? Too much is painful. Like, I love ice cream, but like, if I just ate an entire quart of ice cream by myself, I would have a stomach ache. It would hurt, right? Like, physically hurt.
It'll be good for a while and then it won't be anymore.
Yeah. And we don't talk about that. And when it comes to money, and I've actually like in my personal budget, I have done this. Like I have an enough number. This number is enough. This number is like my comfortable can do all of the things, right? And I don't want to buy a yacht, and I don't want to, go see the Titanic wreckage, and I don't want to go to space. But like, I want to do some fun things. So like that's my,
I assume, right? So there's like there are constraints.
Yeah. But then I've got my third level is anything beyond this number, I can invest in whatever, to your point, I want to contribute to. Philanthropy or venture capital or whatever the case is. Like, this is how I want to see a better world. Every penny above this number, that is what I can contribute to. Great. But I've only done that based on, being comfortable with this first number and then being comfortable with this next. This is my version of, wanting to go to space.
And those are more possible when I think we are making these, when we're doing these, and I dare I say discipline, when we're doing these disciplines,
intentional.
I was about to bring in another word, like to me, spiritual practice.
Yeah.
The way I can get, and they are spiritual practices for me. It is a spiritual practice for me to spend time with my numbers. It is a spiritual practice for me to like look at the investments, to meet with our financial advisors, and to ask all the questions, and to be really, especially intentional about what I want to bring into the business and what I want to invest in, and things like that. So when I'm doing that, it makes it like, why is it a spiritual practice? Because it makes me feel like I'm more aligned with my purpose on earth and like what I'm here to do and things like that. So
I love that so much. I love it. So thank you for sharing that. I love that and agree 100%. I know that you have talked about this in some of your other podcasts, but because money is tied so much to shame, I think that's one of the barriers for a lot of people to think about it in terms of a spiritual practice. And I'll say in my journey of kind of de-shaming my financial programming was changing even the word money or capital to resource. So like if I'm managing my resources, this is one of the many resources I have to manage in bringing my full humanness, right, to earth and to this experience, bringing my time and my skills and my energy to a world that I want to contribute to. Money's just one of those resources that I'm bringing to the table. And that for me, that change in language was really helpful in overcoming that shame barrier. The like, I don't need to earn 5 million. I don't need to earn what if I had 5 million of resources to manage, I could really put those to good use. So
yeah, you can choose to earn it.
Right.
So what is your background that you came from this shame and then ended up working in money as prominently as you do?
Well, I guess like that's what we all do, right? We like go towards what we need to learn, more than anything. Yeah. My money story is that my parents got divorced when I was 10, and my mom struggled financially post-divorce. And because I'm the oldest daughter and like overachiever, I was like, not doing that. Just nope, not relying on anybody else. Never going to be dependent on somebody else financially. I am going to choose otherwise, and leaned full bore into curiosity. I want to learn everything I possibly can about money. So made a career out of it, made a career out of helping women avoid my mom's position. Like I've done all of those things, but I'm mid 40s now. And it's only been the last couple years that I've really made huge strides in the not overcompensating for the shame, not outperforming the shame, right? So that I would never have to feel ashamed because I would perform really well, to where I've gotten to a much more comfortable position where it's just like, money is just one of the many things that I get to manage and can manage. And for me, comes easily to me. And so I'm happy that I can help out and contribute.
And how do you talk to your children about money so that and to maybe other people's children so that doesn't get perpetuated?
Yeah. So I look at money as a skill set. Like being good with money is just a set of skills. And so just like teaching my kids how to use a spoon, just like teaching them how to drive, just like any other life skill that they're brushing their teeth, right? Any of those things, I'm going to have to teach them financial skills. And I've broken them down, earning or creating money is a skill set in and of itself. Spending money is a skill set, saving, investing, and giving. Right. And using debt wisely, I would say is inside of those skills. So I just look at it like, hey, this is something that we do. My kids have 3 jars. My kids are 3 and 5. They have 3 jars. Spend, share, and save. And every single dollar that comes into their life, we just know, okay, well, you got $1. We got to put 50% of it in here, 50% of it in here, or 30%, 30%, 30%. But they just know when they get money, I think so much of the challenge we have in our society about money is that we're programmed that the only thing we can do with it is spend it.
Yep.
It's like the default setting is spend.
Comes in, goes out.
Yep. So my kids know every dollar that comes in, there's 3 things we do with it. And as they get older, they'll know there's 5 or 6 things we could do with it. But all of these are skills that we're going to talk about in practice as they get older.
Love it. Really, really, really good. And how do you prevent money shame to the extent that we can?
I don't know if I've given that a lot of thought. Oh, and I'm noticing the time. I am going to have to hop here. I think that shame, like what I've learned from Brene Brown as an example is like shame can only live in hiding. So like the more you shine a light on something, like shame just can't live there. I think as long as my kids honor their past selves, they honor their future selves, and they enjoy their life today, like I will not tie any, they have to earn their money in a certain way. They have to earn a certain amount. Like they have to be in a certain profession. I think one of the things that I learned somewhere along the way is I've decided my kids are going to have careers that don't even exist today. So I have like no expectation or pressure for them to like be a doctor or a lawyer or, something like that, financial advisor. Like they're going to be in a career that doesn't exist today. And my job isn't to dictate that to them. My job is just to provide an environment that helps them learn and grow and be comfortable making mistakes. Maybe that's something, as you were talking about business owners, I think is important for all of us to remember too. Every single business owner I know and the wealthiest people I know, and I have had conversations with billionaires, every single one of us can tell you financial mistakes we've made. And most of us can tell you like how big the mistake was. It was a 6-figure mistake. It was a 7-figure mistake. It could be a huge mistake. None of us get out of any skill set, money included, without making mistakes along the way. So you don't have to beat yourself up about mistakes. You learn from it and you do better next time. That's what we all do.
Super. Love it. That's how we learn resilience as well. So amazing to talk to you, Jen. Really, really appreciate the unapologetic cash flow. And I hope that this will help everyone who's listening to become a more profitable and joyful consultant.
Me too. It's always a pleasure, Samantha.